because actions are verily by intention, as the Prophet ﷺ told us. The second part is the dua. Your conversation with Allah is so important. Our conversation with Allah is what creates the foundation of our relationship with Allah, and it's the Prophet ﷺ described dua as the head or the essence of ibadah, worship. So we have to be really, really comfortable with dua, and it has to be something that we go to immediately. It actually should be our first go-to before anything else. Before we freak out, before we panic, before we go to the means, before we go to the medicine, before we go to the doctor, before we go for help, before we go for reaching out to a friend or reaching out to a spouse or a parent, actually should be dua first. And that's part of our reliance on Allah. It's a habit that we should develop. And the more we get in the habit of speaking to Allah, and the more comfortable we are speaking to Allah, and speaking to Allah is in any language. You don't have to just speak to Allah in a specific language. So the more comfortable we get with speaking to Allah, the better our worship will be, and the better our relationship will be. And that's obvious because, if you think about any relationship that you have, what happens if communication gets cut off? Or what happens when there's a breakdown in communication? Think about marriage, right? What happens when communication dies? The relationship dies. And so it's the same thing. If our communication with Allah dies, then that obviously kills the relationship. Get in the habit of dua. The other thing that I want to say is that no success comes without the help of Allah. There's going to be no benefit in anything that we do without the help of Allah. There is no tawfiq without the help of Allah. There's no success, and there's no barakah. And there is no ease except what Allah has made easy. Okay? So always just get in the habit of asking Allah to bless what you do, to ease what you do, to help you in all that you do, and all your struggles. So set your intention. What do you hope to gain? What do you hope to gain from this halaqah, and what do you hope to gain today? Maybe there's something specific today that you've been thinking about or struggling with, a question, a difficulty. Bring that to your mind, to your heart, and then make dua about it. All right? Take a few moments and do that now, inshallah. All right. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. So today I want the theme to revolve around a hadith and or dua that we are taught by the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That dua goes like this: Allahumma la sahla illa ma ja'altahu sahla. So the first part of this dua is, O Allah, nothing is easy except what you make easy. وَأَنْتَ تَجْعَلُ الْحَزْنَ إِذَا شِئْتَ سَهْلًا. And if you will, you make what is difficult feel easy. This is the concept that I want to speak about today. The question of why are things so hard? Or how can I make things easier in my life? Or where does change come from? Where does motion come from? Where does transformation come from? Where do results come from? See, as human beings, we want all of these things, right? We want ease. We want results. We want to feel a sense of control, perhaps. But the question of ease and difficulty is often misunderstood, okay? What makes something easy and what makes something difficult? This is what I want to talk about. And deeper than that, how can we take something that is actually maybe objectively difficult, and how can it become easy on us? Isn't that what we all want? So the first thing that I want to say is that in our lives, we should be asking for ease. We actually should be asking for ease. Sometimes we feel like that's the wimpy way out. That's for weaklings, right? That's for people who don't have strong iman, right? That's for people who are weak, who ask for ease. No, I'm a boss. I'm strong. I have solid iman. Therefore, I will never take the easy way. I will never even ask for ease. I'm gonna, white knuckle myself through every difficulty. And sometimes people think that to ask for ease is failing the test. Yeah, I don't know why. Let's try it again. I think it's a battery. Hello? Okay, we're good now? Sometimes people think, woo, okay, there it is. Hello. Sometimes people think that if you ask for ease, or even if you ask for help, that means that you're failing the test. You shouldn't need to ask for help. You shouldn't need to ask for ease if you're really strong. Now, what is the root cause of this? Let's get back to the roots. Everything we talk about, we're always going to look at the roots. Because remember the tree? Everyone remember the tree? This is all about how do we thrive in life. We have to look at roots. Where do you think that comes from? Sometimes it comes from our childhood. Sometimes it comes from the way we're raised. Sometimes it comes from our upbringing, the way we were parented. And the idea is that you should be able to carry the weight of the world without complaining. There's this idea that if you ask for help, that's complaining. That's being, this is my favorite, ungrateful. That to say I need help or to look for the ease or support, that means that you are being weak or you're being ungrateful. Or yes, the idea that, I think we might need to tell him the battery is low, if someone can let him know. I think so. I don't know if that one works, or if it's turned on. So going back to how were we raised? Now this idea has to be unlearned because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created us weak. You might not like to hear that. Allah created us weak. Allah says in the Quran that mankind was created weak. Allah created us needy. That's another word that we don't like. Anybody like the word needy? It's like the worst insult. You're so needy, right? Allah created us needy and weak. And if we do not seek the help and assistance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then what happens then is we, instead of the design of Allah, which is that we turn to Allah in that weakness and we turn to Allah in that neediness, what will happen instead is like the example of the Prophet ﷺ when he said in the hadith, the difference between a believer in hardship and a disbeliever in hardship. And he gives us an analogy. He says that the believer in hardship is like a soft, tender plant. What does a soft, tender plant do when there is strong wind? It bends. But what does the solid pine, he compares the disbeliever in hardship to the solid pine. What happens to the solid pine in strong wind? It breaks, it snaps. And so the problem is that if Allah created us weak and needy, and we do not turn to Allah in that neediness and that weakness, we break. We break. And people see this in different ways in their life. Sometimes we're gonna break because our body is gonna scream out. This is where the idea of the body keeps score. What is that book talking about? The Body Keeps Score is a book about trauma, explaining that even when we try to ignore our pain, our body doesn't ignore it. The body keeps track. And so the body will always scream out. Always. How does the body scream out? Well, it'll show up in illness, in disease, chronic illness, chronic inflammation, autoimmune disease, digestive issues, migraines, and as far as, God forbid, things like cancer. So what we need to realize is this. It is not weakness to ask for help. It is the design of Allah. The design is to ask for help. The design is to humble ourselves and say, I can't do it myself. See, just hearing that might feel a little bit anxiety, causing. To admit that I can't. I need Allah. I need the help of Allah. Every single prophet asked for help from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There is no single prophet who relied on himself. There is no prophet who said, I'm strong, so I got this. Every single prophet turned to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for help. I'm just gonna change these batteries. All right, it is green now. It was red. All right, bismillah. Now, why do I emphasize this? Because every single one of us are going to be tested in different ways. We're going to face challenges. We're going to face hardships. How do we respond to those hardships? And the way we respond to those hardships is going to determine the outcome, right? Many of us, we see the hardship coming, and if we're believers, we know it's a test. It's like seeing a storm approaching. And you're like, okay, I gotta brace myself. There's a storm coming. And we recognize that we're being tested. But where we go wrong is that we harden up instead of soften up. We harden instead of soften. And this is very dangerous, because the harder you get, the more likely you are to break. And the softer you become, the more likely you are to bend and be resilient. So how do we do this in real life? Well, often this is a test, so I have to do this myself. I have to rely on myself. I have to rely on my efforts. I have to work harder. And when I work harder, then I'll be protected. Does any of that sound familiar? Sometimes it's reliance on something else outside of us. Sometimes it might be reliance on our money, or reliance on other people, reliance on our status, reliance on our power. These are all the wrong answers, because Allah gives us storms not to harden up, but to soften, to turn back to Him, and to recognize Allahumma la sahla illa ma ja'altahu sahla, that, oh Allah, nothing is easy except what you have made easy. وَأَنْتَ تَجْعَلُ الْحَزْنَ إِذَا شِئْتَ سَهْلًا. And if you want, you can make whatever is hard easy. This is the reason, and I want to get to the core of hardship. What's hard and what's ease? Like, what's hard and what's easy? What's a definition? Is there like a litmus test to measure a person's hardship? You know what I mean? Like maybe a blood test. Let's check like how hard is your hardship compared to how hard is your hardship. Exactly. There is no blood test, there's no litmus test to say that this hardship is rates a 55 and this one rates a 5,000. Like there's nothing like that. And so the question is, what does make a hardship harder or easier? It's Allah. It's actually not the event itself. And that's very powerful to understand. It's not the experience itself. It's not even the test itself. And I'm going to give you proof of that. For one person, they might go through an experience and it absolutely destroys them. And someone else might go through the same exact experience, and not only does it not destroy them, it might make them stronger. Why does that happen? The same experience affecting two people so differently. The answer to this absolutely has to do with the help of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allahumma la sahla illa ma ja'altahu sahla. Oh Allah, there's nothing easy except what you make easy. And so the level of the hardship or ease, the ease or hardship of the test is actually it's a product, it's related to the help of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. How much have I turned to Allah? How much am I relying on Allah? And you can go back to your own personal experience in this. Have you guys ever noticed that sometimes you'll have a really, really hard test, something that objectively anyone would be like, that's hard. And somehow you're able to get through it, withstand it with so much patience and so much resilience. But then something that's so small will drive you crazy. Anyone know what I'm talking about? I'll tell you a funny example of this. So about 2 years ago, we were at a family friend's house in the UK, and I met one of the prisoners who was just released from Guantanamo. And he had been there for, I think, 15 years or more. Like, he literally lost his entire youth being wrongfully imprisoned. So he lost half his life, wrongfully imprisoned. And he was talking about some of the experiences there. And one of the experiences that really blew my mind was that he said there was one of the inmates who was like a really, really, like one of the inmates who was wrongfully imprisoned was really patient, right? I mean, these are people who have been so wronged that the injustice is like mind-blowing, right? somebody takes you, throws you in a prison, and you're completely innocent for half of your life. So they obviously had patience in this massive test, right? But he said that if the guy was given the wrong flavor of his cake, he'd lose it. Do you not see? I mean, it's funny, but it's deep. Like, he was like, you don't give me anything other than my vanilla. Yeah. He had like a specific flavor. And if they would give him a different flavor than that flavor, he would really like lose it. What do you think is happening in that phenomenon? What do you think? Any ideas?
Is it like a trigger?
I don't think it's a trigger. I mean, he just didn't like it. Like he had a particular flavor he liked, and he did not want you to give him otherwise.
Was he given the cake in the prison, or you're talking?
No, this wasn't. No,
After he comes home?
no. While he's still incarcerated.
I'm surprised he was given.
Well, he was probably not in maximum security at that point, but he's still a prisoner. He doesn't have his freedom. I mean, these guys haven't even been given a trial. Like they've been imprisoned without a trial, you know? Okay, she's saying there's a limit. What do you think?
Maybe like he knows that jail, prison is non-negotiable. There's no like way out of it, so it's just acceptance.
Okay.
Versus the cake, he has
Like he doesn't have a choice. He doesn't have any power there, but he has power there. Okay, what do you think?
I think it's a coping mechanism.
A coping mechanism?
He cannot control the big problem, so he has control over
The small things.
the cake. That's why people cut.
Because then they can have control.
That pain, but they distract from the bigger thing.
So that's very deep. So she's saying that it's because he doesn't have control over the big thing, and so he tries to control the smaller thing. And she said that's why people cut, that they can control that pain, but they can't control other pain. So it's still giving a sense of control when you feel out of control. Yes.
He's not considering it as a test from
Uh-huh.
Allah, because it's something.
It's just cake.
Yes, it's just a cake. That's why he was invited there.
I like that. He's not considering that a test from Allah because it's just cake. So he's like, just give me my cake. Like, give me the right cake. Don't mess it up. I think all of those are all true. But what I thought when I heard that was, look at the difference between when we are left to ourselves versus when Allah is carrying us. That's what I saw. It's like this massive trial. He wasn't carrying himself. Allah's carrying him. And so he's able to withstand what no one would be able to even fathom. But the cake, that's just himself. That's just him. When we are left to ourselves, we can't do anything. That's the lesson. If we are left to ourselves, we can't hold up anything. But if Allah carries us, then even the most massive of trials can feel light. That's the lesson that I got from it. And this is something that actually this is actually something the Prophet ﷺ used to make dua about. He used to say, وَلَا تَكِلْنِي إِلَى نَفْسِي طَرْفَةَ عَيْنٍ. He used to say, do not leave me to myself for the blink of an eye. Like, not very long. And that's the Prophet ﷺ. He is saying, don't leave me to myself. So then I wonder, what about us? What would happen if we were left to ourselves? You and I, normal people. Do you understand? And so the objective is not to feign strength, to be like, I got this. I'm gonna, I'm a boss. I've got this. I'm strong. That is not the objective. The objective is to say and to recognize, I don't got this. I can't do this on my own, and I need Allah. That's actually the correct answer. La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. You know, it's interesting that this statement, the Prophet ﷺ said about this statement, that it is a treasure from the treasures of Jannah. And he also said that it is a cure for 99 ailments. And the least of them is stress and worry. Can you think of why that would be? Let's break it down. La hawla. There is no change in state. Remember at the beginning, I asked, where does change come from? Where do results come from? Where do outcomes come from? Where does help come from? La hawla. There's nothing that can change. We're always wanting things to change for the better, right? We don't like this, we don't like that. La hawla. There is no change in state whatsoever. Wala quwwah. And there is no strength or power. Illa billah. And this is the exceptional structure, right? Because you say there's absolutely none, deleting anything, and then you bring in the exception. Except by Allah. So if you actually absorb this meaning, this is not just a statement of the tongue, it's a meaning. It's a very deep meaning. If you absorb that meaning, that there is no change in anything in my life, and there is no power or strength except by Allah, it would really reduce a lot of your stress and anxiety, wouldn't it? That's why he's saying this is a cure. And the least of those ailments, this is a cure for 99 ailments, the least of them is your stress and your worry and your anxiety. That heavy burden that keeps you up at night. That heavy burden that keeps you constantly worrying, constantly stressed, constantly overthinking. Any overthinkers in the room? No. Can I tell you something deep about overthinking? Are y'all ready for this? You have to be sitting down. Are you guys listening? So I heard this and my mind was like blown. Overthinking is underfeeling. I know. Let me explain. Overthinking is underfeeling. She's like, I'm taking out my notes now. That's what we have to do to take your notes out. Let me explain what that means. It means it's an avoidance tactic. It's actually a way to avoid having to feel the uncomfortable feelings. So you stay in your head. You get it? Make sense? You don't want to feel vulnerable. You don't like it. I don't like to feel vulnerable. You don't want to feel vulnerable. Why don't you want to feel vulnerable? Because in your past, it wasn't safe to show vulnerability. It wasn't safe to cry. It wasn't safe to say you're sad. It wasn't safe. So you don't want to be vulnerable. And the way to keep from being vulnerable and to have to feel those feelings is you overthink. So you stay in your head so that you can avoid feeling the emotion in your body. Very interesting. I'm going to add something, which is also very interesting. Another thing that we do to avoid uncomfortable feelings, so one of them is overthinking, staying in your head. The other thing we do to avoid uncomfortable feelings is to be very controlling. So when you're very controlling, when you're always trying to control a situation, what you're actually doing is trying to protect yourself from having to feel uncomfortable. Because what you're trying to do is control the outcome. You're trying to make sure that the outcome doesn't have to make you feel something you don't want to feel. So it's ultimately an avoidance of emotion. It's an avoidance of uncomfortable emotion. It's almost a fear of emotion. Deep, huh? I know. Ouch. She's like, oh, the psychologist. It's true. You know what's very interesting? Because I was speaking to a psychiatrist, and the psychiatrist had such deep, old trauma. And they are a psychiatrist. And they're like literally like in their late 50s. And they had not healed from their own trauma. And it's like, you can, the example I gave is like you can have a wound on your arm, like a gunshot wound. And you could describe it in every medical term. But nothing is gonna happen or nothing is gonna change unless you actually heal the wound. And so sometimes people know the names, know how to accept. This is also what happens when, you know how someone might like read a lot about mental health or read a lot about self-help, and they'll know all the terms. They'll be like self-diagnosing, right? Oh, I have this and I have that and this and that. And you have all these terms. You have just diagnosed every part of yourself. This is all intellectualizing. This is intellectualization. Do you know intellectualization is actually one of the defense mechanisms according to Freud? Like it is a defense mechanism. When you overdo this to avoid this. You actually stay in your head and you stay thinking and you overthink and you break it down analytically and you know all the names and all the way to explain, but you haven't actually felt it or done the work to heal it. It's like looking at the wound and describing it very academically. All the medical terminology. But this particular psychiatrist hadn't actually healed, even though they're a psychiatrist. So yes, sometimes we overthink as a way to avoid vulnerability. And we over-control as a way to avoid vulnerability. We're scared of emotion. She's just laughing. We're scared to feel. So what's the solution? So here's the solution. And obviously it's a journey, it's a process. But the solution is actually finding safety to feel and be vulnerable. And that's the whole idea of therapy, isn't it? I mean, that is the idea. Any proper therapy is simply about creating a safe place for you to just feel, for you to just get into the emotions that you haven't processed. That's it. And this is why across disciplines, when they did research about effective therapy, they essentially found that across disciplines, it's not about what type of therapy, it's about, do you feel understood? Do you feel seen? Do you feel safe and not judged and empathize? And like you feel that they empathize with you. That's actually what makes therapy effective. It's interesting also that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did that for the Prophet alayhi salam. All of these things, like when you look at how Allah counseled the Prophet alayhi salam, it's so deep because he counseled him by telling him, I see you. I know what you're going through. Like, to me, it's like validation. That's validation. He's saying to the Prophet, ﷺ, we know that what they're saying is hurting you. We know that what they're doing is constricting your chest. We know. We see, we hear. It's like validation upon validation upon validation. That's how people heal, by the way. It's simply that. That's why people go to therapy. That's it, essentially. It's for someone to listen, to understand, and to validate. To say, you're safe, you're not going to be judged, and it's safe for you to be vulnerable. I'm gonna tell you that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is our safe space. And whatever we feel, whatever armor we have that we've held our whole life, the only way to actually be strong and resilient and thrive is to put down the armor and take your vulnerability. Remember, we said human beings were created needy and weak. To take that vulnerability, that neediness and that weakness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's actually how you get strong. It's not by armoring up. It's not by avoiding your emotions. It's not by avoiding vulnerability. It's not by staying in your head and rationalizing and over-intellectualizing. All that does is ends up causing your body to get sick. Because your body's keeping the score, remember? Whatever you're avoiding by staying in your head, it's getting stored in the body. That's a lot, eh? Okay, I'm gonna pause there. All right. Subhanakallah bihamdaka ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. Let me pause and then get some questions, thoughts, reflections. You guys look like you've been punched in the face. What? By me, I'm sorry. What?
I'm starting to feel really weak and needy now.
That's great news. That's great. Yes.
As you were talking, I was thinking about people who are put in really difficult situations. It's like those who commit suicide. Did they not see the ease, or did Allah give them more than they can? Like, what do you think?
Okay, so she's asking a question about people who get to a point where it's just like, it's too much. Like, for example, people who commit suicide. A'udhu billah, may Allah protect us and protect all of our family and children and ummah. So I don't think it's a black and white answer. I don't think it's a simple answer. I think sometimes there are mental health issues. Always, I think there are. How Allah judges a person is based on what they are able to do, understand, their capacity. That's what la yukallifullahu nafsan illa wus'aha means. It means that Allah will never hold you accountable beyond your ability. So if someone, for example, is paranoid schizophrenic, and they truly believed that in their delusion or in their paranoia that they had to, hurt themselves in order to protect their loved one, or whatever it was, they had a delusion, and it's like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to hold them accountable based on what's happening in their brain, right? But beyond that is that there's a lot of despair that comes with not having Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to turn to. Simple as that. And that is the only real protection from despair, is really having faith. Faith is the only true protection from despair. And ultimately, suicide is about despair. It's about giving up on anything being better or any goodness or any positive. It's basically utter despair. So our protection from despair, it's not because we're better than someone else, but it's simply that protection is Allah. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow us to always rely on Allah and never fall into despair, no matter what. Any other questions? One other thing I want to say is, let me add to that, is that as a community and like collectively, I mean, there's also that feeling of connection that I think is being lost in our society. The more that we live like in these sort of like, like the nuclear family is very different than how it used to be. The way we're raising kids is in a very different environment and structure than how it used to be. So they talk like people like Dr. Gabor Mate and others talk about how children were not meant to be raised in these single family nuclear families, but rather in a village, right? That whole idea of the village, we've lost that. And that has a huge consequence on the parents and the parenting and the children. So I think that, and then you have social media. Many of us, many children are given a phone very young, when they're very young, and that's very dangerous to their mental health. All studies have shown that it increases depression and increases anxiety, increases loneliness. So, and we're growing up with all these different factors, right? And then religion is not really part of our life, right? It's God is no longer in the picture in our society, especially Western society. And so when you put all of these things together, isolation, right? Disconnection, despair, and then no faith, what do you expect? So it's really about coming back to our faith, but also in our community. Community is very important. We are an ummah. And an ummah is like one body. When the Prophet ﷺ said, if there's one part of this body that's in pain, the whole body responds. We don't have that really anymore, like in our modern society. Everybody is so disconnected. And they're disconnected from the community. They're disconnected from their parents too. There's a huge disconnect between children and parents. Why is that happening? There's a lot of factors, but I think one of the factors is that because we're not, like mothers, for example, aren't given the support that they need. Like, especially in America, like, what is our maternity leave? Like, nothing? Our maternity leave, by the way, like in comparison to other countries, is pathetic. It doesn't exist. Other countries have a year of paid maternity leave, and some have several years, like in Europe. And then you have a situation where mothers are not given that support, so then they can't raise children who have the secure attachment necessary for the child to be healthy. Like, that's really simply put. So all of these issues have root causes. And then you add to that trauma, you add to that abuse, you add to that mental health issues. And then if you don't have faith and you don't have that community support, it's you can understand why there's an epidemic. Even when we look at youth who are leaving Islam, this is also something that's increasing, right? Why is that happening? When you look at that phenomenon, you realize, and you study it, you realize that it has nothing to do with the faith. It has nothing to do with religion. It's actually trauma. That every single one of those kids who decide, I'm not Muslim anymore, or I'm gonna leave Islam, there is something deeply, there is deep trauma. And and what's happening is that there isn't the support for that. So yeah, it's a holistic answer, but definitely faith will give you that protection from despair. But we also have a role to play as a community and as an ummah, because we have to go back to supporting each other. Other questions?
Can you explain more? You said overthinking to ignore vulnerability.
Mm-hmm.
How about feeling numb about the situation? Someone is going to die, and then
Yeah.
you feel
Numb. You feel nothing.
You don't want to feel anything.
Yeah.
And you don't want to be attached to
Yeah.
that person. You
Yeah.
don't make
Yeah.
What do you describe this?
Sure. So her question, I'll repeat her question. She's saying, you talked about overthinking as a way to avoid vulnerability. What about just being numb? Like you don't want to feel anything, like finding out that someone is going to die and you just don't want to feel anything. That's also a defense mechanism. So feeling numb means that you've just suppressed the grief, or you've suppressed the pain. So as you know, suppressing something doesn't make it disappear, right? I gave the example of the cheesecake in the bag. You have this grief, and if you don't process it, it doesn't go away. It just turns to poison. That's the cheesecake that's undigested in your bag, you know? So a lot of us our way of dealing with hard things, hard emotions, grief, uncomfortable emotion, and vulnerability is to just put it in our bag. Just turn it off. That is the same thing as avoiding it by overthinking, because ultimately you're not dealing with it. You're not processing it. A lot of us are scared. So what keeps people from wanting to get into their difficult emotions? It's usually fear, maybe fear of losing control, maybe fear of, if I start, I won't stop. You know, I've heard this a lot, like, I'm so worried that if I get into my own stuff, that it'll be like Pandora's box. Like, I don't even know what's all in there. I'm scared of what's in there. I'm scared that if I start crying, I won't stop. I'm scared if I start digging, it's just gonna be too scary. I honestly think that reliance on Allah is the way out of that. With the help, obviously, and support of therapy, you know, people social support, that's fine. But subhanAllah, and I was very moved. One of the sisters actually here, she said this a couple halakas ago. She said that when she was doing EMDR, you know, it's a type of therapy used for trauma healing, that she was told, think of a safe, like a safe figure during the EMDR, because the process is basically taking you through what happened, but now you're safe. So it's telling yourself, your brain, your body, your nervous system that like you're safe. She said that she thought about Allah, that her safe figure was Allah in this process of EMDR, and she said it was revolutionary, not just in her trauma healing, but it actually strengthened her relationship with Allah. And I think that's really the lesson. It's that Allah, it's like Allah's not gonna let you fall. Do you believe that? You know? And it's really relying on Allah in the process of healing. Does that make sense? We have to remember, like, a lot of us think about Allah, a lot of us think about Allah as if He's like far away, just like watching us. You know, like judging. Like He's the judge, but He's really far. Like a professor who's giving you a final exam. Does the professor who's giving you an exam come and help you out with the questions? Can you be like, excuse me, professor, I have no idea what I'm doing, so can you help me? That's cheating, right? Some of us think about Allah like that. Like the, far off professor testing us. Or the far off judge. That has to change. Because He's not far off, and He's not just far away judging you. He is with you. He is carrying you, and He's the only one who can carry you. So if you really rely on Allah, you won't be afraid to feel. And you won't be afraid to get into Pandora's box, because you know that whatever happens, Allah's got you. Do you understand what that means? Whatever happens, Allah's got me. He's not gonna let me fall He's not gonna let me just be destroyed. He's not gonna allow that. Do you believe that? You know what I mean? So some of it has to do with actually building our tawakkul and seeing Allah as that protective figure in our healing journey. Does that make sense? I read this quote when I was younger. I'm trying to remember it, but it just like, it really struck me. It was basically like having something like that, having the faith that if you go off the cliff, either God will catch you or he'll give you wings. Like this idea that, what's that?
Positivity.
Yeah, it's this idea that Allah will always catch you. Husn al-dhann billah, exactly. And we spoke about that in the previous halaqas. Like the fact that like you don't think you're on your own. This is so essential. I mean, I'm saying it, as if it's obvious, but it's actually something many of us need to really believe. You're not on your own. So many of us think we're on our own. Like we believe in Allah, far away. We believe in Allah, but we actually feel alone.
Like the story of Hagar.
Like
Yeah, that's the perfect.
Hajar, yes. Even though she seemed alone in the desert, she wasn't. Allah was with her. And she knew that. When Musa alayhi salam is standing in front of the Red Sea and Pharaoh's army's coming, he says, no, we're not going to be overtaken. Inna ma'i rabbi. Like, my Lord is with me. That's what I'm talking about. It's that true belief. And by the way, this can't be intellectual. This is not an intellectual thing. Intellectually, we all can say, yeah, Allah's with me. Of course he's with me. No. This is not intellectualizing. This is truly believing Allah is with you. Meaning he's not going to leave you to yourself. He's not going to leave you alone. The only time we're left to ourselves is if we leave Allah. Do you understand what that means? If we leave Allah, if we close the door on Allah, if we run away from Allah. But Allah doesn't do that to us. Allah does not abandon us if we're seeking Him. So it's about knowing that you're not alone in your struggles. You're not alone in your healing. You're not alone in your feeling. So you're not afraid. You don't become afraid because you know that Allah will always carry you no matter what happens. You understand? No matter how much it feels like I'm gonna break. No, you won't. You have Allah. Inna ma'i. See, that's why I love that story so much, because here you have Bani Israel. They're just like, that's it for us, فَلَمَّا تَرَاءَ الْجَمْعَانِ قَالَ أَصْحَابُ مُوسَى إِنَّا لَمُدْرَكُونَ. It's like Pharaoh is coming with his army, and this is a superpower army. And then you got Musa alayhi salam with a bunch of slaves. And those slaves, they had this mentality that like, okay, that's it for us. إِنَّا لَمُدْرَكُونَ. We're going to be overtaken now. قَالَ كَلَّا. He said, no way, absolutely not. Why? إِنَّ مَعِيَ رَبِّي سَيَهْدِينِ. My Lord is with me. He will get me through this. And I want to say that also applies to the process of feeling and healing and emotion and vulnerability and doing the work. It's the same thing. It's the same concept. It's every time we feel inna lamudrakun, we are going to be overtaken. I can't get into that Pandora's box called emotion and pain and grief and vulnerability. It's too much. It's too much. Inna ma'i rabbi kalla. You say kalla. By no means. Inna ma'i rabbi sayahdeen. My Lord is with me and He will guide me through. So I do believe that tawakkul is actually the secret. Of course, you use the tools. Like I said, support, therapy. These things are the tools. Even with Musa alayhi salam, he was told to use the tools, didn't he? Allah said, strike the sea with your staff. So we also have to take action, but know that Allah is carrying us through. Like the sister who went and got EMDR. She got the therapy, but it was Allah who was her protective figure, and that's what got her through it.
I have two questions, but just to add real quick to what she was saying. One of my aunts had said one time, leaving the US, she said that sometimes when you're grieving, but if you really feel it in your heart,
Yeah.
just reading it, but you actually have to feel like
Yeah.
it's gonna come true, like whatever.
Yeah, dua is definitely. The sister's saying that, like, dua, for example, is saying it, believing it, versus just saying it. It's not the same.
So, I know you touched on it earlier, from Surah Baqarah, like, it says, like, Allah does not test the soul beyond what it can handle. This might be a silly question, but what is the benefit of, let's say, person A having this big of a test versus person B having this small of a test? Like, is there a potential for greater reward, or, like, why is one person given a bigger test versus another? From
Right.
your perspective.
Okay, so she's asking, what is the benefit of, like, person A having a big test and person B having a smaller test? Is there more of a reward for one versus the other? The answer is, I'm not God. I cannot possibly presume to be able to know why Allah tests as He does. But I do have full conviction that He knows what He's doing. He tests according to capability, He tests according to His knowledge and according to His wisdom. So I don't know why. I don't know why, and I don't need to know why. That's the point. But what I do know is that it is exactly as it should be. Does that make sense? It's like, I'll tell you, I got this question from one of the youth, and it was a really interesting question, and it had to do with trying to understand why God does what He does. Like, why do certain things happen the way they do, and why do certain things not happen? And the thing I said to him was, if a 2-year-old has to, like, get neurosurgery, right? God forbid the 2-year-old has a tumor and has to get surgery. A'udhu billah. Does the 2-year-old need to first understand everything that this surgeon is going to do before the surgery? Is that even possible? Can you imagine that 2-year-old who's just learned how to talk, who's still in diapers, saying, nope, you have to explain it to me first. I have to understand it first. That's pretty presumptive, yeah? It's a bit delusional to think that the 2-year-old, let alone us, I mean, even we're not gonna understand, that child is gonna understand why the surgeon does what he or she does. The understanding is, I don't understand what you're doing, but I trust you. And that's the question. Do we trust the surgeon? That is the question, isn't it? Because if you don't trust the surgeon, you'll never, ever let them open you up. You have to trust them. But you're never going to understand the whole procedure because everyone needs to stay in their lane. Like, a 2-year-old understands, like, toys. And the surgeon understands brain surgery. Like, so when we talk about Allah, and Allah is high above any analogy, how am I possibly going to be able to understand the full divine wisdom of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Now, having said that, yes, Allah does tell us that we are, of course, rewarded for our patience. And the more we show patience, the more we're rewarded. The more, sometimes, the harder something is, yes, sometimes the more reward. So for example, I'll give you a simple example. The Prophet ﷺ told us that when you recite the Quran, you get rewarded. But if you struggle to recite the Quran and you still do it, you get more reward. So yes, there is that understanding that sometimes the more struggle, the more reward. But also the sincerity of the heart can give you more reward depending on what you're doing. So Allah knows best. Yeah. Yep.
I wanted to comment on the question that the sister was saying about grief and pain, the numbness.
Yeah, numbness.
So when you're processing the feelings, the fear of having the feelings is one thing, but there's also, with the grief, there's exhaustion, like physical exhaustion.
Yeah.
So when a person, anytime they revisit the grief, they're physically feeling like they're moving a truck, a semi-truck,
Yeah.
or I don't know, it feels like the truck really hits you.
Every time.
So, I mean, it's hard to like keep going back to that.
Yep. So the sister's saying that there's one side of it which is like numbing it.
Physical pain.
The physical, okay, very good. The numbing of it, but then the other side is that actually going back to that grief and feeling it is so painful. And there's physical pain. Actually, it's true. Like even they found that with grief and loss of a loved one, it feels like physical pain in the brain. It's registered the same. So it is very painful. But one thing I would say is that if you go through the process of grieving and healing, it doesn't always feel it doesn't feel that painful forever. And the fact that it is still feeling that painful every time means it wasn't processed. Look, food. When you process the food and you finish digesting it, then you can release it. But when you don't digest it, it stays stuck. So I think a lot of grief, it actually stays stuck. It's not that it's been processed and then it just keeps hurting. No, it's stuck. It's stuck. Something is undigested and therefore it is stuck. So the answer isn't to avoid it, it's to digest it. And once it's digested, it doesn't hurt the same forever. That's, you understand? Again, I'll tell you this. The best way to heal any kind of pain is to turn to Allah with it. And I'm telling you, like, it is, the more you turn to Allah with your pain without suppressing it. Without suppressing it. Look at Yaqub alayhi salam. He did not suppress his pain. He took it to Allah. He said, إِنَّمَا أَشْكُو بَثِّي وَحُزْنِي إِلَى اللَّهِ. He said, I complain of my pain and my sadness to Allah. He didn't try to act like it wasn't fazing him. He wasn't suppressing it. You understand? That's what every prophet did, and that's how they healed, is they took it to Allah. They didn't suppress it. And you know, when you look at, anytime you look at the du'as of prophets, it's so mind-boggling because they were all so humble in front of Allah. They never acted like big shots. They never did. You know, when you look at Musa alayhi salam, he was so strong he could touch a guy and kill him. Like he just hit him and he didn't mean to, he killed him. He's so strong, and yet he says to Allah, he says that I am poor to whatever good you send down to me. Look at the humility. This is how the prophets healed, is that they turned to Allah in their pain. They didn't suppress it. And every single one of them, you look at their du'as. Huh? Ibrahim alayhi salam. Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam, study the dua of Ta'if. The dua of Ta'if is absolute, like, humility. He is not suppressing. Read that dua, tell me if he's suppressing. Tell me if he is acting like it's not a big deal. He's not. He's not. He's in so much pain. It's painful. Ayyub alayhi salam. Ayyub, what does he say to Allah that saves him? Anyone? He turns to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and he says that أَنِّي مَسَّنِيَ الضُّرُّ وَأَنْتَ أَرْحَمُ الرَّاحِمِينَ. I want to just really address this suppression thing, because that's not what prophets did. He says, أَنِّي مَسَّنِيَ الضُّرُّ. Look at that. Look what he's saying. He's saying, indeed, difficulty has befallen me. He's saying, I am in pain. That's what he's saying to Allah. أَنِّي مَسَّنِيَ الضُّرُّ وَأَنْتَ أَرْحَمُ الرَّاحِمِينَ. And you are the most merciful of the merciful. So it's the admitting of pain. It's the honesty with Allah. It's like, I'm not going to suppress with Allah. It's being human. And it's taking the pain to Allah, and then it's having hope at the same time. Not thinking that you're going to break forever. Not thinking it's going to hurt forever. It doesn't hurt forever. It doesn't hurt the same. It only hurts and keeps hurting the same because it's not been digested. It's like it's stuck. The grief is stuck. You're stuck. And anytime you find someone who is stuck in their grief for years, maybe 10 years, it's because they never actually felt it. They never actually grieved. They never actually processed it. So it's stuck there. So don't be afraid of your grief. Don't be afraid of your pain. It does not last forever. And the more you turn to Allah in the pain, the quicker you heal. And you can ask Allah to make it easy, you know. Allahumma la sahla illa ma ja'altahu sahla. This is like one of my favorite du'as. I'll tell you another thing that I found to be really effective, and that is, you know, the du'a for sickness. When you make du'a for the du'a of sickness or healing from sickness, right? That du'a I have found to be very effective in also heartbreak and pain and grief. So I like, honestly, just repeating that dua over and over, it's like a healer for heartbreak as well. The dua of that you would if someone was physically ill. Allah, yeah. And then the other thing is tahajjud. Tahajjud prayer. That time of tahajjud is a very healing time. Turning to Allah in tahajjud. With your fear, with your pain, with your grief. And istighfar. Absolutely. Istighfar. La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. Istighfar. Allahumma salli wa sallim wa barik ala Muhammad. Sending peace and blessings on the Prophet. And tahajjud time. اللهم رب الناس أذهب البأس أشفي أنت الشافي لا شفاء إلا شفاءك شفاء لا يغادر سقما. That dua. Any other questions? Yes.
I think personally I'm an overfeeler, not an overthinker, and I find that like biological and psychological differences between me and my husband, me and my sons, it becomes like a battleground of feeling too much emotion and leaning into turning those emotions to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and showing my kids especially that it's not weak just because maybe their dad doesn't agree that emotions are okay. I don't know always how to deal with that, like as, a couple that sees emotions differently.
Okay, so let me try to repeat what you said. Very important. She's saying that she feels like she's an overfeeler versus maybe her husband and so she's like, the question of how do you navigate maybe when people around you have a different opinion about emotion or a different perspective of what to do with emotion?
And even that, emotions created by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and we should turn to Him in emotion.
Yes, that you should turn to Allah in emotion because Allah created emotion. Absolutely. This is actually something I wrote about in Healing the Emptiness, which is that every single emotion, not just emotion, every single life circumstance can be used to get closer to Allah. Everything. When you're rich, you can use that to get closer to Allah. When you're poor, you can use that to get closer to Allah. When you're healthy, you can use that to get closer to Allah. When you're sick, you can use that to get closer to Allah. When you're sad, you can use that to get closer to Allah. When you're happy, you can use that to get closer to Allah. When you're afraid, you can use that to get closer to Allah. Every single life circumstance, every single emotion can actually and should actually be used as a tool to get closer to Allah. So you're absolutely right. Emotion is created by Allah. Allah didn't make a mistake, in creating emotion. They all serve a purpose. I 100% agree with you. And I think you're teaching your kids the right thing by using that emotion to go to Allah. Other people will not necessarily see that. And that's because everyone is at a different place in their own healing journey. We talked, especially in the previous halakas, and you can check the recordings if you hadn't attended, about where do these different types of attachment styles stem from, like avoidance. The avoidant attachment is essentially attachment disorder. It comes from your childhood. So people who avoid emotion, there's a root cause of that. And I also touched upon it in the parenting seminar. But you and your husband, deal differently with emotion, and it has to do with your childhoods. Yeah.
Can you clarify the state of beautiful patience? Because a lot of times we hear about it, but you feel guilty because you're not acting a certain way, or if you express it, you don't know what exactly it is.
Good question. So how do we define beautiful patience? And you might feel guilty, like, oh, if you express it, that's you complaining and you're not being patient. Great question. So the definition of sabr is that you do not complain against Allah. Now, it's important to understand the difference between complaining to Allah and complaining against Allah. All right, let me explain. Complaining to Allah is what I just discussed that prophets did. They turned to Allah in their pain. Complaining about Allah or against Allah is saying, Ya Allah, how could you do this to me? Or why me? Or it's not fair. This is unjust. A'udhu billah. That's complaining against. That is a lack of sabr. That's not sabrun jameel or sabr at all. But when you take your pain to Allah, that's actually something that will bring you closer to Allah. That doesn't mean you're not being patient. Crying doesn't mean you're not being patient. We know this because the Prophet ﷺ cried when he was grieving. We know that Yaqub ﷺ cried until he went blind. So we know that crying does not contradict sabrun jameel. But what contradicts sabr is when you complain against Allah. When you say this isn't fair, or you're angry at Allah, or you're saying, why me? Or this isn't right. It's almost like you're saying, A'udhu billah, Allah made a mistake. Right? A'udhu billah. That's what we want to avoid. And if we ever were to fall into that because of our own human weakness, we should seek refuge in Allah, seek forgiveness from Allah, and try to do better. Redeem. It's not about perfection. It's not about perfection. We're going to mess up. We're not going to get it right every time. But it's about trying to do better as we move forward. That we get back up, we repent, and we try to fix it. So going back to Allah, to fix it, to do better, to redeem, Okay. Yeah.
I was thinking sabr jameel or beautiful patience can be post-traumatic growth.
It is. I talked about post-traumatic growth in healing the emptiness, which is actually what Allah describes in the Quran about hardships is all post-traumatic growth. Like he says that لَعَلَّهُمْ يَرْجِعُونَ لَعَلَّهُمْ يَتَضَرَّعُونَ. Like Allah says He gives us hardships for us to come back to Him. He gives us hardships so that we'll learn humility. Even when you look at the list of what post-traumatic growth looks like, one of the things is compassion. That you learn compassion for yourself and others, that you grow in compassion. And subhanAllah, so the Quran talks about post-traumatic growth. The growth that can come out of hardships. That's the entire Quranic paradigm about hardships, is that it makes you grow. It purifies you. It elevates you.
I just want to add about sabr jameel. Sometimes they say not to complain to people, complain to Allah. This is like
So she's saying that sometimes they say not to complain to people. So the reason why that can be, again, I'm gonna qualify that statement to the best of my ability. I think the danger is not going to people for help. For example, going to therapy, is that complaining to people, right? One could put that in well, no, I can't go get therapy because that's not sabrun jameel. No.
No, like complaining to people without any goal.
But again, talking about your pain can actually help you heal. So is that complaining to people? Again, that's why I'm saying it's very important to qualify what that means. My understanding is that the problem is when you're complaining to people about Allah. Do you see the difference? When I'm complaining to people against Allah, I am angry at Allah and I'm complaining to people about it. That's the problem. But suppose I'm complaining to people, not against Allah, not about Allah, but I'm just looking for help. I'm looking for support. I'm in pain. I'm complaining about my own pain, my own self, not about Allah. So it's like, it's like if you're sick and you go to a doctor, why don't you just suck it up? You know what I mean? It's kind of like that. Versus I'm gonna go to the doctor because I'm sick and I'm like cursing Allah that I'm sick. No, that's the problem.
Maybe they mean don't overdo it, like shakwa, because they say something shakwa لغير الله مذلة.
الشكوى ايه?
لغير الله مذلة.
So complaining, the translation we're saying is complaining to other than Allah will demean you or something.
Sometimes.
I think again, it depends on how and why. Because you can be complaining in a way that is actually angry at Allah. And this is the key. Am I complaining against Allah? Or am I looking for help in order to, heal or just support? Obviously, we go to Allah first and foremost. But that doesn't mean we can't get help from the means. See, there's asbab, صح? Right? It's like telling a person, don't go to the hospital when you break your leg. Just rely on Allah. Well, obviously, I have to rely on Allah, but I still need to go to the hospital, and I'm still going to need crutches. I'm still going to need a cast. Yes?
Check your Zoom. Someone texted and said they couldn't hear you, or like a couple people said it.
Yeah, I have it on, so I don't know. I'll send them the link, the recording, inshallah. Okay. Okay, yes, we'll end with you, inshallah.
You said that, that relying on Allah, like, He won't let us fall, but sometimes I feel like the point of a hardship is that you feel like you're falling. So, what do you recommend to, like, bridge that gap? Because I understand the examples like prophets, and I just feel like they had, like, this, like, full conviction.
Yeah.
But, like, a normal person, I feel like doesn't sometimes have that.
Yeah, the full conviction. So when I say that Allah won't let you fall, I don't mean that you're not going to have hardships. I don't mean that it's not going to be painful. I don't mean any of that. What I mean is that you won't break, in the sense of you won't be destroyed. All right? Every human being goes through difficulties, and prophets experienced pain. What I'm saying is that when we rely on Allah, He protects us so that we are not destroyed by our hardships. We will still be, here's the analogy that I want you to think about. Storms in our lives. Like, suppose there's a hurricane, right? You might feel the rain of the hurricane. You might hear the sound of the hurricane, but Allah will protect you from being destroyed by the hurricane. So our hardships are like that, where we get touched by them. Every human being is, even prophets. Having faith doesn't mean you don't experience any pain or that things won't be hard. What faith does is it protects you from drowning in those hardships or being destroyed by them. You can't control the weather, but Allah protects us in the weather. Does that make sense? All right. سبحانك الله وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر.